Welcome to Unbreakable Voices, the podcast where we rise up together to share stories, support each other, and spark real change. I'm Karen, and alongside the deadly and fearless Chelsea that we've got, gee, she's amazing, and we're thrilled to invite you into our community.
As survivors turned advocates, we know firsthand the struggles and silences faced by many in the Northern Territory. But we also know that healing is possible and that every voice deserves to be heard. Our mission is to create a safe and culturally respectful space where we can laugh, cry, and challenge at times where the systems have let so many of us down.
So in each episode, we'll dive into the power of storytelling, share our lived experiences, speak with experts, and celebrate the resilience of survivors. We'll discuss everything from healing practices to community support, all while keeping it real and relatable, because let's face it, sometimes laughter is the best medicine.
So whether you're a survivor, an ally, or just curious about our journey, join us as we break the silence, build connections, and remind each other that we are not broken, we are unbreakable.
And the dragonflies start flying around. Go, 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 balloon. Bitte my bitty guy, man. And the seasons changing.
We would like to acknowledge that this podcast is being recorded on the beautiful lands of the Larrakia people in Darwin. We pay our respects to elders, past and present. We also acknowledge and honour the lives lost to violence and suicide. We recognise that meaningful change must happen together as a united community so the next generation can heal, grow and thrive in the Northern Territory.
Today, we gather to honour the memory of my dear friend Ronnie, a devoted mother of 3 who was expecting her 4th child. Tragically, her life was cut short by an act of domestic violence, and just last week, the perpetrator took his own life, leaving behind a family without justice.
So the police have launched what they call a major investigation into her death, but the pain and loss remain profound for those who loved her. Joining us today is Lesley, Ronnie's second mother and a pillar of strength during this heartbreaking time. Lesley, thank you for being here with us. Let's take this moment to remember Ronnie and shed a light on the importance of justice for victims of domestic violence.
Bitte my bitty guy, man. And the seasons changing. It's around me. And the seasons changing. It's around me. Good joke, bangarang, yeah, girl.
Auntie Lesley, welcome to Unbreakable Voices, Rise Up NT. We're very excited to have you on, despite the difficult conversations that we're going to have today. But welcome.
Thank you, and I'm glad to be here, love.
Yeah, fantastic.
Thank you.
Look, we've given a little bit of an insight prior to you coming on about what today's episode is about. So delving straight into it, can you tell us a little bit about VW, your relationship to her and who she was as a person?
Yeah, no worries, I can easily do that. So I'm going to actually refer to Ronnie girl because that's who she was. She was actually my stepdaughter. Known Ronnie since she was maybe about 6 years old, living out at Kakadu, and watched her grow up. She's just such an amazing young person as a little one. She was always the mother figure. She was the big sister. She was always, getting kids together and sort of, making them happy. Always made them smile, and she was also. She was like a mediator, really, because when it came to kids fighting and stuff like that, she would just walk up and sort of settle the whole situation down. And that's what I always remember her as that little mediator, when she was growing, when she was young, but also growing up. Um, like I said, she was the big sister to lots of people, lots of community family mob. They looked up to her. She had an amazing voice. I remember, waking up and she'll be in the shower singing, and I'll be thinking, who's this? Where's this voice coming from?
Yeah.
But made me really, really proud because she loved singing. She you know would sing anywhere. I'd have my music on, and then she'd be bellowing it all out, and I'd have to turn it down because I preferred to listen to her instead of all the music that was coming through the old cassettes back in them days before they turned into CDs. So
Making us
yeah,
sound old.
yes. But with Ronnie, yeah, she'd always put others before her, as well. And then when she decided to have her children, like I've got three beautiful, amazing young grandsons, which I'm very, very proud, and they are very, very beautiful children. And of course, at the time when she did pass, she did have and had another child with her. So, and with her passing and also losing another grandchild, was sort of, yeah, it was heartbreaking for me. I actually had time with Ronnie, when I managed to get her away from being up in Darwin, and getting her to come down to me was a bit of a challenge because I all the incidents that she was going through, all the domestic violence stuff that she was going, she would ring me and tell me what was going on. Even if she was walking out on the street all busted up and stuff like that, she would ring me. And I would cry inside. I was crying because I always told my kids that you are not boxing bags for anybody. You are a
Yeah.
human being, you are a strong person. And, and to keep that in mind.
Mm.
But like I said, Ronnie was, yeah, she would always, like I played a lot of sports. She would be there taking the kids away and entertaining the kids while the parents were out playing sports and stuff like that. So I'll always remember her being that strong woman that she really, really was. And she was strong.
She was. For our listeners, I also knew Ronnie. I've grown up with her since we were young kids. And that's Auntie Lesley to me. She particularly was a strong young person. I remember she kind of had a smile, didn't she? And her laughter would light up an entire room.
Mm,
She had the ability to make anybody happy. And just drawing on, you said, she loved to sing. I know that, when she got to sing with Archie Roach at the
mm,
Sydney Opera House and some of the
yes,
achievements that she had,
yes,
such a
yes.
massive advocate for young people, in
Hmm.
children's grounds and the other organisations that she was supporting. Can you tell
Yes.
us a bit about that?
Um, so working in with Children's Ground, like she rang me one day and she said, "Oh, I'm now running the Children's Ground, and we're doing all of this the really good things." But what she really wanted to do was to, um, you know, get the kids to sing as well and to learn how to write their own songs. Now, Ronnie actually has a couple of YouTube videos of her singing in a little studio out at Kakadu, and like I go back, and when I want to hear a voice or anything like that, I go back and I watch those videos. There was one particular song that I burst into tears, and it's where she's the young fella singing out, and it was all about around, I think it was around about suicide and stuff like that, and her her words at the as part of the chorus was, help me. And yeah, and I just burst into tears, really.
Yeah. Do you think those words that she was singing, she was almost singing for herself at that point?
Yeah, I do. Because there were times where she needed the help. And and when she was contacting me, and you know I don't know, maybe just that having that spiritual connection with Veronica, she it did help her. Because I used to say to her, if you're feeling down or you want someone to talk to or anything like that, you know you can call me anytime. I don't care where you are, just call me. I'm here for you. I'll listen to you. I'm not here to judge you, but I'm listening to you. And then in the end, I had to say, Ronnie, when is enough for you, babe?
Mm.
When are you, and her words were, oh, but I don't want to leave my kids. I don't want to, and I'm worried for my kids. And I said, you know what? If he thinks that he's such a good person and he's a good father, just leave him. Because if anything happens to those children, then you'll know what kind of person he really is.
And we're referring to the kids, and just so our listeners know, they were 3 boys
Yeah.
under the age of 6,
Yep.
so very young children. And I know that in conversations that you and I have had in regards to this situation, and the impact that it's had on Newsmob and the families,
Mm-hmm.
that, she did in fact leave, get to that stage, didn't she, after many, many years, and she came to you. Can you walk
Yep.
us through what happened at that point?
Oh, well, it was on a Saturday night. She rings me and she said, Lel, Mum, um, he did it again. I had to get away. So she more or less had to run and get off the property because he had the keys. He would lock her and the kids up, um, and where she couldn't get out. And she managed to get out this time. And this is out at Berry Springs.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was walking in the dark. And then she said to me, and I said, is there any houses or anything around? And she said, no, I can't see anything, but I'm just walking in the dark. I said, well, keep me online and we'll, until you find a light or something. Then she came to a lamppost, and so, I just was just talking to her and to say, well, Ronnie, something has to give right here, right now. This can't keep going before he kills you. You know that you have to understand that. And she said, yeah, I do. And then all of a sudden, there was a car, there was a light, and she sort of froze. She goes, oh, there's a car coming. And I said, it's okay, you're under the light. If it's him, you can run. But it wasn't him, thank God. Um, it was actually a couple, and I don't know who they are, but I would really love to meet them because they they're the ones that actually helped her. And there was a lady that actually held Veronica for me and told her that, she has to have a plan B and a plan C so that for her to get away. And so at the time, I could hear them talking to her, asking her if she was okay, if she needed to go somewhere. And she just said, oh, hang on a minute. And she, spoke to the lady. And so the lady, she said, look, Lel, I'm going to go now. I'll go with this couple. They're going to take me somewhere safe. And I said, well, you know what, bub, you make sure that when you're safe, you ring me back. And which she did do the very next day. And, for that lady to actually have that yarn with my daughter, because at a very young age herself, she was hospitalised. She was in ICU. So she was telling Veronica her life at a very young age of the domestic violence that she went through, that she couldn't do it anymore because it almost killed her at the age of 17. And I
How
said to
amazing for
Veronica,
that.
just think about it.
Mm.
Yeah, I said, think about it. She was 17 and now she walked away and she's a stronger person and she's here to help you. Because at that time, when she was standing underneath the light, I was praying to God that an angel would come and pick my girl up.
Yeah.
And having those 2 people that did go to her at her aid, because it was just out of the blue. She said, oh, hang on a minute, there's a car coming. And I was thinking, thank you, God, because they're the 2 that saved my daughter at that time and to get her away. And for that lady to actually to talk about what she was going through, get Veronica to actually talk about what was actually happening to her and to set those plans up to get away. because come the Monday, she basically said to the lady, look, I need to go back because I really need to grab my boys. And when she went back on the Monday, he was still intoxicated. He was still abusive towards her, right?
Yep.
And then that Monday he decided, oh, well, I'm going back to the shop to get some more alcohol. So thought he can go in the thing. But what Veronica did do is that she actually hid the Hilux keys, because on the Hilux keys was a key for the gate. And Veronica knew that. So she hid it away, and he was going through swearing at her, abusing her even more because he couldn't find the keys. Because he would literally walk out of the house and take all the keys with her, lock her in, her and the kids in the house. And so when she did that, she knew straight away she had 5 minutes to get out. And all she could do was put the kids' car seats in the car and get the kids out. And she literally left everything behind, all her ID, her bank card, everything behind. And she actually went the back road. The lady actually told her which streets to go through to the back road to get onto Stewart Highway. And when she did that, she rang me. She told me that I'm leaving now, Lesley. I'm leaving now, Mum, and I'll call you when I'm on the Stewart Highway, which she did.
Yeah.
And I said, right, call me when you get to Adelaide River. So when she got to Adelaide River, she was just so scared.
Yeah.
She goes, I know he's going to come look for me. I know he's going to come look for you. But I was thinking, well, how would he come look for you when? No, then I realised that there was another car there, because he obviously went to buy more alcohol at the shop. But
Yeah.
she bypassed the shop, so he couldn't see her drive past, did everything. So she more or less like vanished, her and the kids. And then when she got to Adelaide River, told her to fuel up. Your father put money in the account. And she said, well, I don't have no key card. I can't access it. I said, that's okay. How about you just go in, get what you have to get with you and the kids, but I need you to go to the police station and report what's going on. And which I'm very thankful, because the police at the Adelaide River actually helped her to get into the women's shelter in Katherine.
Yep.
They realised, because she did say, look, my car's unregistered, and they just said, look, if you're on the run, just go. That will get sorted out. When you get to Katherine, that can get sorted out. And she did manage to, after fueling up the car, getting things for the kids, getting to Katherine in the women's shelter there. And actually, she rang me. She was relieved. By the time she left from Adelaide River and got to Katherine, she had over 70 odd messages, threatening messages from him, abusive messages. If you don't come back, I'm going to kill you. You and the kids are nothing. You're dead. All these horrible, horrible messages to her, that she had to turn her phone off.
Yeah.
Because she was more afraid that he can track her down to where she's going to Katherine. That she had to turn her phone off.
So how long did she stay in Katherine for?
She was there for 2 days because she was more worried. She would only turn on her phone, because I was communicating with her. She would only turn it on the phone maybe once to get messages from me. But then, from 70 messages to over 90, it just was ongoing every day, every hour, the abuse. So by the time she spent 2 days in Katherine, she had to tell Katherine, I've got to go. I have to leave. So they've managed to book her into Tennant Creek, the women's shelter there, where I actually met her. I said to Veronica, Ronnie, I'm coming. I'll meet you in Tennant, and I'll help you there. So her and the kids managed to get to Tennant Creek, and it was really heartbreaking, because I looked at my girl's car and she had 2 flat tires, or 4 bald tires, and one of them was flat. That I said to her, we ain't going anywhere till we get that tire fixed. And I actually purchased another tire. Then I realised that the car was actually running on love. She could have blown the engine on the way. So I said, no, we're going to get oil, put oil in that car so we can get into Alice Springs. So, and it was really, really hard. The first time I actually met my grandchildren was in Tennant Creek, and I had little gifts for the boys,
Yeah. And
and
why?
such, th- they were beautiful kids. They just look like her. They really do.
And meeting them so late, to kind of give, our listeners a bit of a bigger picture.
Yep.
Yourself, myself, every single one of her friends. She, he took her away from all of us during that relationship. That
Yep.
she wasn't allowed to have friends, was she? And she wasn't allowed to have family contacts. It was very
No.
much controlled.
Yep. Yep. He controlled everything of her.
Mm.
Whenever there wasn't any money or anything like that, he would literally make her ring her father up, and you know, poor thing, Peter. He'd send anything to do to help her with the kids. He would send it to her because it was it was actually killing Peter inside to watch his daughter to go down this track. And Veronica told him, said, I never grew up in a domestic violence relation. My parents, even with my mum, who passed away at a young age, but even with my stepmom, my mum and dad were never abusive towards themselves, but towards us kids. They never showed that my mum, as in myself, would actually, and I would hide that stuff from the kids because kids shouldn't be seeing
No.
what's going on. Kids shouldn't be hearing what's going on. They shouldn't have that effect on the abuse. So, and Veronica, and I said to Veronica, I said, well, and I'm sorry I keep calling her Veronica because she is still my girl,
That's okay.
Ronnie. Yeah. I said, Ronnie, you know that you weren't brought up like that. And she said, I know. I said, but you have to walk away, because when they were living out at Kakadu, he thought that he had more rights than everybody else out there.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, Veronica, he doesn't have any rights. He's a Johnny come lately. And so you grew up out there all your life.
Yeah.
You've got full family out there. Or,
So-
that still live out there. Yeah.
So, Lesley, how long did she sort of stay with you guys in Alice Springs? How long did she stay away from him?
It would have been about just over 3 months. Because when she spent Christmas with me and my twin sister and her cousin, because they got three kids too, and so we just had a little, it was beautiful to see my grandchildren and giving them presents and stuff like that, and she said to me at Christmas time, she said, oh, she just felt really relaxed, and she knew that she needed the break away from him. She definitely needed the break because she couldn't handle getting choked, getting punched around, or any of that sort of thing. And then while she was in Alice, she went and had the kids checked up. She had herself checked up and started to realise that she was pregnant with the fourth child, and that she was actually, at the time, she was already, 3.5 months, sort of thing, in December. So it was really, really hard. And I just sort of looked at her and thinking, oh, my goodness, what, are you having another one? And I said, do you think you'll be right? And she goes, you know what, when I'm on my own, I will be right. Because she was focusing on the boys. Yeah. And she was still breastfeeding.
Yeah.
And
So
at
what
The youngest
changed?
one.
Yeah. And at the time she was connected
Well,
with services, wasn't she? So
yep. So what changed was the fact that she decided, no, you know what, I want to, she just felt homesick, and I understand that because, grew up in the top end most of her life, and being in Central Australia was just a different setting here. And she did feel homesick. She wanted to reconnect back with her sister, Jennifer. She wanted to reconnect with her brother, her two brothers, but also with her father. She wanted to share the boys with them. She wanted to introduce the boys to them so that they know who their grandfather is, but the fact that they've actually got older cousins as well, and have that connection and to be a family again, because she didn't feel like a family. Not with him. He isolated her. And she wanted that family connection. And she told him that, no, if I come back up to Darwin, um, I'm going to have my own place, but you can't come there.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he didn't want to hear that
Yeah.
because he just thought, well, you're still my wife and I'll do whatever I want
Yeah.
sort of attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And, to me, that's wrong.
Yeah. So what happened
Yeah.
next, Lesley?
So what happened was that children, territory families and housing, they basically told her, oh, well, if you want a house back in Darwin, then you need to move up there. Hang on a minute, love. And I said, hang on, they're all under the same umbrella.
Yeah.
So you should be doing the 6 months here in Central Australia and then get the transfer back up to the thing. But no, they actually told her, and then she believed them.
Yeah.
Oh, would you be safe in our in our women's shelter and all this sort of stuff? Well, obviously she wasn't safe,
Mm.
and I do believe that he had contact, still had contact with Veronica. Because he was sort of crying around for the kids. How could you take my kids away from me?
Yeah. Manipulating.
I've always, but the thing is that he never looked after them.
No.
It was Veronica that was looking after the kids.
So when she
my
came back
daughter-
up here,
Yep.
sorry, darling, but when
Yeah.
she came back up here, did she go straight into a women's shelter?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And from there, what ended up happening?
Well, this is just my opinion because we lost contact when she came up. Well, like 3 weeks of no contact whatsoever. Both myself and Peter tried to reach out to Veronica, wondering, did she make it to Darwin? So just assuming that she was out at Palmerston at the time, he would have made contact with her. Because when she passed, I didn't realise that. I was just assuming that she was at the women's shelter in Humpty D, but that wasn't the case. It was actually a men's shelter. So it's like, well, hang on a minute. What was she doing at the men's shelter?
Yeah.
And just want to add, there was a domestic violence order in place the time where he was not meant to be anywhere near her either.
Yeah.
That's right.
Ordered by the courts and police. So there's probably a lot of big questions there for you as to what happened and what went wrong. You've got somebody that, a violent perpetrator who's been directed by the courts and by police to not be anywhere near Ronnie. And in that 3 weeks, I mean, there's a lot of unanswered questions, isn't there?
Yes, there is. Yeah. And both after it all happened, so, Peter and I, we sort of sat down and we just said, well, when was the last time you had contact with her? And it was in January was the last time I had actual contact with her. Where I was trying to ring her and to find out whether she made it to Darwin safely.
Yeah. But you didn't hear from her?
Nothing.
Until you found out she passed?
Passed, yep.
And what date was that?
So that was on the 17th of February.
Right.
I actually got a phone call from my son, my younger son, who was in Queensland. He was so upset. And he just said, Mum, I've got some bad news. And I said, what's that, son? And he said, oh, Ronnie's passed. And I said, what are you talking about? I said, Dad's up at the hospital and Veronica's has passed on. And all I could do was just scream. I just fell to the ground and I screamed and screamed. And I called out to my mum and I said, is this really true, Mum?
Yeah.
And I could hear my mum's voice say, she's okay, love, we got her now. She's safe.
Yeah.
And I knew that her mum, Anne, would be there waiting for her. And that she wouldn't have to be hurt anymore.
Yeah.
But then just the pain for my 3 grandchildren was just like, how unfair. They don't even know what happened to their mum.
We're going to talk to you about this loss. How has it affected you and the family, and not just emotionally but mentally, because some of the conversations we've had, as you know, is that, you know, you don't even have Ronnie's body, hasn't been released. And there's been a lot of, you know, unanswered question from you guys in regards to the investigation, and we'll sort of delve into what's happened recently with the perpetrator. But, you know, how has this loss impacted you as a family?
Oh, look, the day I found out about Ronnie, I booked a plane. I booked a ticket straight to Darwin, and you know, I was sitting down with the rest of the family, and you know, having that big cry with them, and you know, because I was the last person that saw Ronnie, really, and she told me a lot of stuff. Sorry, dog's moving me
That's
around.
all right. Well, I seen his little face there.
Pushing me around.
That's okay.
And you know, yeah. So, and like, I don't know. Veronica just opened up to me. Like when she was here in Alice, she told me everything. What was really, really going on with her. You know, being in a relationship, you know, for 15 years, and that's when the abuse started. I remember a phone call from her, when she was into the 3 years of the relationship, and she told me what he did to her. You know, they were coming back from Queensland. He would flog her up in Queensland, and the parents wouldn't do anything. His parents wouldn't do anything.
Yep.
His parents, because they were staying with his parents. So they did no intervention with him. And then when they left, he, you know, they along the Barkly Highway, they stopped and to sort of help this fella, and he thought that Veronica was flirty with the guy, and you know, and got her back in the car, you know, a few couple of miles away, and then decides to stop and flog her for it.
Yeah.
Just a bit of background too on this bloke, Lesley. Sorry to cut you off. This is a Bullender fella. He's a white fella, and he was in the army, wasn't he? Not for part of his career. You know, and whilst Ronnie was a beautiful Indigenous woman, this fella was Bullender. He was a white fella, wasn't he?
Yep. Well, allegedly he has Aboriginal, but you know, I want to know how much percent is that? Probably that much.
Everyone, they all like to try and claim stuff these days, isn't it? And but most certainly he had a career in the army as well, wasn't he? And he was quite trained in use of force and things of that nature.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
So just going back, I was just going to say, going back to that, just a little bit about like how it impacted you and the family. When the police sort of stepped in, did they offer any social work or counselling support or anything like that to the family?
No. Look, when we found out, you know, the police, the domestic violence unit, did talk to Peter, and only got one side. But what Peter just said, look, this is my ex-wife's number. Talk to her because she knows more about what's happened with Veronica. Yeah. She knows more about the actual domestic violence of what was really going on with Veronica, with Ronnie. So you need to talk to her. So when I got to Darwin and Peter gave me the number, and I rang that woman and told her what was going on. And she said, oh, look, I'm going to have to talk to my superintendent to see whether if we wanted to interview or not. And guess what? I never heard a bloody thing from them.
I was going to ask you that.
Seriously. They didn't even contact me, even though I started telling them certain things, what was happening. Look, I think, and her words were, I think I got enough evidence. And I said, are you sure?
So this is the police.
This is the police.
I do have a question in regards to that, and that is that, you know, how would you describe the police and the legal systems handling of this case, given that you've still not been provided any real answers as to how Veronica, my apologies for saying her name, or how Ronnie passed, and, you know, you're still sitting there, aren't you, with what happened, who's responsible. She was connected with services to help her, and support her. This gentleman was on a full non-contact order. How did this happen? And, what was the answers provided to you about the cause of death, and how do you think, even now, what was the response from the police, and how did that make you feel?
Look, honestly, we still don't even know what actually happened. We don't even have the coroner's report. They haven't even released my daughter's body. So we're still in limbo. Um,
And how
the
many
person
months
that
is
was
that
working,
since she's been?
so what,
February, March, April, May,
so
June.
4 months.
And they haven't released your
4 months.
daughter's body
No,
for
they
any
still
part
have
of
not released
closure.
her body. No, nothing.
Are they regularly in contact?
Only when certain. No, they're not, because they're not in contact with me, but they are in contact with Peter.
Yeah.
And so, Peter wanted answers. We want answers of, exactly what the circumstances were. How did she actually die? The hospital saying, she died from internal bleeding.
And
To
how
the
was that
heart or something like
caused?
that.
Yeah.
Well, that's my thing. How was it caused? So we still don't even know about that. So when the police officers, or the person in charge of that case, they just more or less, just telling Peter, this is what's happened. And it was every now and then. It wasn't no update. And I said to Peter, has the police actually offered you any support or any counselling or anything like that? And he goes, no.
That's not good enough, is it? And
No, it's not.
And we've spoken in a previous podcast about police responses and things like that, and how it needs to be improved, systemic issues and all of that. And you and I have spoken. We went, where was the media around the issues with Ronnie? I mean, we had a glimpse of it, and we're not ashamed or afraid to say that had this been a white woman down south, which has been the case as recently, I mean, it was plastered over everything.
Oh, even a white woman up here.
Even a white woman up here.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're calling the kettle black, we're calling it as it is. And this is backed by facts, and this is backed by the inquiry from Elizabeth Armitage, who said there are racial biases and there are stuff when it comes to Aboriginal women in Northern Territory experiencing domestic violence. And, this case is so close to home for me, as you know. I call you Auntie Lesley. I grew up with Ronnie my whole life. Had to be one of the most beautiful people I have ever come across. And regardless of what was going on, she could walk into a room and have everybody just smiling and filled with so much love, particularly her very infectious laugh and that smile that we all love and we hold on to so dearly. And during this, we'd love to show a clip of her when she did sing with Archie Roach, which is just absolutely beautiful, as well as pictures of her. Look, I think, something that hit us recently, Leslie, when we've been talking on the phone, was what was your reaction when you heard that before even presenting to court or before the investigation was over, that the perpetrator very cowardly took his life? What was that like?
I had mixed emotions. I was so angry because I felt this bastard's a coward. He just copped out to you, fucker. But at the same time, what you did is that you took your fucking life, you took my daughter's life, you took your life away. What about my 3 grandchildren?
Yeah.
And and the 4th child, which,
Yeah, and look, yeah. The 4th child, the 4th child, God, and which really, really upset Ronnie, because Ronnie, she just said, she got upset and she said, his mother saying, that child's not yours.
Yeah.
Telling him that that's not his child. Like, bitch, your son had my daughter locked up in a house where he could do whatever he wanted to.
Yeah.
I guess too, I wanted to ask, what unanswered questions still weigh heavily on your heart and Uncle Peter's heart, and what are the questions that are weighing heavy on you now that you feel that, the injustice is there and you perhaps will never get the answers to? What are those questions, if you could ask police, and you got the chance to ask this coward if he was still here, what would they be?
I think the questions that I'd be asking straight up, when are we going to get our girl back?
Yeah.
So we can put her to rest. Not worried about him. His family can deal with him. But I want my daughter back. I want to know what really happened to her in those 3 weeks of no contact. They're saying that they've got all the evidence. What evidence have you really got?
Can I take it
Can
back
I-
a little bit though? Because we sort of jumped where, yep, we've talked
Yeah.
about that he's actually passed now. But
Yeah.
was he arrested on the scene?
Yes, he was.
Okay. And was he jailed for a while or through that period, or what had happened?
Well,
or was he
basically,
released?
he was jailed for 4 days because
And
of
then-
breach of his thing. And
and
it's like,
bailed.
well, bailed. Yep.
So
for
he
4
was only
days.
bailed because of the fact that he broke the domestic violence order.
Yep.
That was it. So that was why he was
That was it.
arrested. But he
Yep,
wasn't
yep.
arrested for her causing her death.
No, because
No.
they were going to have the actual. His court date was on the. I think it's the 12th of June.
Yeah. But in the meantime, he's out walking around
He
for that
was,
period.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was out walking around.
Yeah.
And I think, Lesley, we'd had yarns and everyone had yarns and people that,
Yep.
that really, in our circle and particularly us Kakadu mob, I mean, this fella was cited high-fiving people out on bail drinking at
Yeah.
well-known Darwin establishments only days after she passed.
Yes, that's right.
And, the insult and some of the threats that he made to people during that period, there was no remorse. There was absolutely nothing. And I mean, pictures were taken of him. It was reported back to the family, and we know how heartbreaking, devastating that was and the frustration that lied there because there was technicalities with the investigation itself that a high-risk, violent perpetrator
Yep.
who was known to police for these violences was bailed on some technicalities.
Yep.
And then there being a complete lack of this communication to yourselves.
Yep.
We know that there was a lot of anger and frustration in that space, myself
Yeah.
included. You
Yeah.
know,
So when he got bailed, I said to Peter, what are we going to do? And so Peter, well, I'll just lock the gate.
yeah.
And he's like, well, put cameras up. Let's catch him.
And what ended up
my
happening
youngest
to the
son was still-
babies, the grandbabies?
So the grandbabies are now in welfare care.
Yeah.
I actually asked welfare to keep them there until I find out what was going to happen with him.
Yeah, yeah.
And good thing
After
you
12
did
of July.
because
But, yeah.
with he had have had access to these children. The question
He
does
would've
beg to
done it.
differ. He may have
Yeah.
harmed them
Yeah.
prior to him
Yeah, of course
taking
he
his
would've.
own life.
Life, that's right. That's right. And I know he's actually, the funny thing is that when I spoke to welfare, I told welfare that what he would try and do
Yeah.
is that he would bring his mother and his sisters and he will threaten them to try and get the kids, because as far as he's concerned, no one was allowed to have his children.
Yeah.
And I just thought, you dog, you took my daughter away.
Yeah.
If anyone's not allowed to have their children, it'll be you and your family.
Well, he still wanted that full control.
Yeah, that's
He
right.
did. Yep,
Yeah.
he did.
Mm.
But
What would
now
justice-
he's gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about, well, I want the kids. And then it'll be, because I have never met his mum. And if I do, I don't know what I'll say to her, really.
Understandably.
But yeah, I wouldn't know what to say.
Yeah.
But I would be polite to her because of the grandchildren. And like she's only met maybe one, and then I think Maxie was only a baby when she met Maxie, but she's never met Don Don.
Yeah.
So, Auntie Lesley, what would justice look like for your family now, given everything that's happened? What does justice look like for you now?
Well, I think for justice, was to basically have it on record that he was the perpetrator to start off with.
Yep.
That he did kill the two, both my daughter and my granddaughter and my grandchild. That everything that he took from Veronica, I want it back, including his compensation.
Yep.
Because I would love to set up a trust account for my 3 grandchildren, because they're the ones who are actually fully entitled to that.
Yeah, for sure.
They're entitled to have everything that Ronnie and their father, they're entitled to receive all of that, not his family. Sorry, that's not going to happen, because I will fight nail and tooth for that.
Yep.
I think that, is there anything, I guess, us or the community or other people can do to support you, those babies, during this time to honour her memory?
What I'd like to do once we've actually get her body back and we bury her back out to Kakadu where her mother is, because that's one thing that I did ask her when she was alive. And I had to be frank with her. I said, if anything happens, I want to know where you would want to be buried. And she sort of looked at me like, oh, no, that's not going to happen. I said, no, Veronica, I'm being real here. So tell me. She goes, oh, well, I want to be with my mum.
Yeah.
I said, no worries. And that's something that I actually told the rest of the family. No, she's going back to where her mother is. Her mother's got her in heaven now, but we need to put her back where her mum is.
Yeah.
And absolutely give her the send-off she deserves too.
And I want to do a vigilant candlelight for her.
We've been,
because that hasn't even been done.
No,
so that's something we will definitely do.
Because it's something that's us letting her go as well.
We would love to support you in that space and help arrange that, and we're
100%.
sure that people within the community would also love to get on board. With your permission, we're hoping to, at the end of this episode, is share that video of her and Archie Roach singing, and the
great.
joyfulness that we see in her, and that beautiful smile. We'd love our listeners to sit back and have a look at that clip and see her in her full brightness and gleam, and that's how we like to remember her.
Yeah. And there's another YouTube video of her singing about her country.
Oh, we'd love to have that if you can send it through.
Yeah.
That would be beautiful.
I'll have to send that through. I'll send that link through. It's absolutely gorgeous.
That
And
would
it's
be
her,
amazing.
singing in language, but also,
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, as well. And the other thing too is that I know that there is a lot of other women out there, that's particularly other families. I'd love to have them to come and join me really when we do the end of this, because this is about families that have been affected, about losing a loved one, but also the injustice and the bullshit that we had to go through with the police.
Yeah.
There's still, I'm not the only one, but I'm pretty sure there's probably hundreds other local mob that have gone through the same thing.
Yeah. So that's what we're trying to achieve, isn't it, Karen, by doing this? Because we do know that sometimes the attitudes, responses and the dealings with NT Police, there's areas that needs massive improvement.
Yeah. And this podcast is about giving, our communities a platform to talk about what needs to change as well. So in saying that, what do you think needs to be changed legally?
Oh, look, seriously?
Yep.
I think what really does need to be, there needs to be, I know they've got it like a domestic violence unit. Well, since you got the domestic violence unit, there should be support mechanisms in that unit to support the families. Because even though they are the police, but there should be, there was nothing offered to Peter and I, literally nothing.
Yeah.
So, it's like, well, hang on a minute.
It's not good enough.
Good unit, you mother.
You just lost your daughter. You need support.
And communication and regular communication. about what's
Yep, as
happening,
well.
because that's your right when it
Yep.
comes to an investigation, and you should be regularly informed of what this is looking
Yeah.
like. And I think that they
But
should
even like with cancelling.
absolutely.
Well, that's it too. That's where they lack empathy, and we talked about it in the
Yeah.
last podcast.
Yes.
I think they don't have that empathy or understanding because it's
Yep.
just a job to them.
And
So
job
it's-
numbers.
But when it becomes
Yeah.
personal for them, then they
Yeah.
have that understanding, you know. But unfortunately, they don't. So it's just
Yeah.
it's another Indigenous girl that is lost.
And in speaking of that, I mean, we've just lost another young Indigenous girl last week.
Yeah.
Yep.
We knew her. She worked for us,
Yep.
and in admin, and that some time back, you know, and far too young. And that
Yeah, that's right.
perpetrator, I did have a look into him. I mean, he'd already been before the Supreme Court on violent offending.
Yeah. Why is he out?
Well, you know, and we've got
Yeah.
to ask, and you know, it was a pretty
Yeah.
flimsy sentence for what he did do back then. But you know, the questions have got to be asked, and I said this in our last podcast. We can't always rely on police and services. We need to get back to standing together as a community, becoming neighbours,
Yep.
knowing everybody knows everybody,
Yeah.
and making it is everyone's business.
Yeah.
Stop
Of course it
stop
is.
saying it's none of my business. Oh, I'm not going to. It's fucking everybody's business, and do something, because the one time that you do may actually save a fucking life.
Exactly.
And also, when we say community, we're talking about black, white, yellow. We don't care what
Everybody.
It
colour
doesn't
you
matter where
are.
you come
No,
from,
it
Everyone.
shouldn't
what colour
matter.
you are.
Should not matter.
As a community, we need to be, looking out for our, other community members,
Yep.
Yep, that's right.
This is not normal behaviour.
No.
Where does it end?
That's right.
Yeah, and it's not cultural behaviour either.
No, it's
That's-
not cultural
that's right.
behaviour, no.
Yeah.
Lesley, thank you so much for coming on and the bravery to do that. I know we'd been talking about it for some time. I think just before we leave the episode, we did have one last question, and I'll let
Yep.
Karen shoot off with that.
So we always give ourselves a little last message. So what message would you like to send to other families experiencing, going through the same hurt and pain that you have?
My message is be strong. Be boisterous. Be loved. And always remember, I've got a pendant of my daughter. They'll always be in our hearts forever.
Yeah.
So that's my message. And never back down. Never give up. And fight for what you believe. You know, fight for the one you love, you lost. Because they don't have a voice no more, but we do.
Yeah.
Well said, Auntie
Oh,
Lesley.
thank
We love you.
Thank you. I'm going to go cry now.
Me too.
Look,
Thank you. You've been amazing.
amazing. And look, you know,
Well,
to
thank you.
the rest of our Kakadu family, we
Yep.
we hope that we've covered everything and given you mob support too. And just know that in the end of this, Karen and I do have those contacts, and these are difficult conversations. Please know, and if you are feeling upset and triggered by the stuff that we're talking about, please reach out to us so we can link you in with the right supports. But Auntie Lesley, love you to pieces. Thank you
Love
very
yous too.
much.
Thank you for having me on.
Where's our love heart?
She'll always be here.
Not this one, this one.
Don't listen to her. And and we know she'd be so proud of you.
Yeah.
So we love you. Thank you, and we'll talk
Thank
soon.
you very much.
Thank you.
For sure. Love you.
Love you too.
All right.
Sis.
Hello.
Ta-da.
Ma,
See ya.
bobo.
when the river starts going down, and the dragonflies start flying around. Go, 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 ballroom. Bitte my pity guide me, and the seasons changing, it surrounds me. And the seasons changing, it surrounds me. Good joke, bangarang, yeah, gang, water gang, good on Malay. Good joke, bangarang, yeah, gang, water gang, good on Malay. And the seasons changing, when the river starts flowing, me, and the rain starts to fall. Good joke, bangarang, go ka big, yeah, gang, bidi my, water gang, bidi guy me, good on Malay. And the seasons changing, it surrounds me. And the seasons changing, it surrounds me. Good joke, bangarang, yeah, gang, water gang, good on Malay. Good joke, and the seasons changing, it surrounds me. Water gang, good on, and the seasons changing, it surrounds me. When the river starts flowing,